Thank you. There's a Tibetan proverb which says, if you want to know what the future looks like, look to what you're doing, is an active verb, in the present. I'm going to speak to you about what I know, what I do. Maybe I've come to regret it a little bit, but the whole point is to speak to you about it and see what we can do about it, about banking and financial markets. It's a perfect storm. It's pretty disastrous. And in fact, if any of you come across any article in any magazine or newspaper which says anything positive about bankers, financial markets, please tell me. Just let me know, email me, call me. It will cheer me up considerably. Bankers have become the scapegoats of everything that seems to have gone wrong in the world. And it's not even new. It's happened for quite some time, as you know. About 8 months ago, I was in Megève. It's a ski resort in La Haute-Savoie, France. And I was feeling pretty good. I love to ski, beautiful powder snow. The sun was shining. I was in a cable car going up. And there was a couple there, a charming couple, English couple. Must have been in their mid-50s, early 60s. And it was about a 10-minute ride, and we had time to get to know each other. So they first asked me about Megève and the restaurants and so on. And then the conversation turned around to, the woman asked me, and so what do you do? And I said, feeling innocent and perfectly good about it, I'm a Swiss private banker. Paul. Oh dear, you're very brave to admit it. And later on, the man in the conversation said, and what have you done to us? Referring to not perhaps just me, but I was feeling personally responsible and guilty. Now at the time, I was in my ski parka and so on. I didn't have another identity. And even if I did, because I was a member of the change leaders, but a novice at it, hadn't thought about that at all. But today, I do have another identity, and I'm going to come out of the closet. The situation is pretty bad. I have a colleague at work who was admitted to an illustrious club in London. And his sponsors said, you have to give an acceptance speech. And they said, look, you can talk about anything you want, but please do not tell them what you do. What is it about financial markets and banking? I look at this and people are blaming the system. They've lost faith in the system. They're trying to fix the system. We have market regulators. We have agents coming in to fix the system, to change the system. People have lost faith. Let's give it up. Capitalism doesn't work anymore. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, first of all, to look at a system and blame a system or an instrument is pretty strange. It's a bit like having a government agent bursting into your kitchen. You're there chopping vegetables with a beautiful Solingen sharp knife. And they go, you put down that murder weapon. We're going to confiscate it from you. And in fact, we're going to confiscate all these murder weapons in the entire region. And of course, then they do a survey and they realize 6 months later that the murder rate has not actually gone down, but it's become extremely difficult for anybody to prepare lunch. The system, the financial systems, in my mind, are brilliant. Very, very intelligent people have spent decades, even centuries, but recent decades putting together a system or systems which work remarkably well. And in fact, what's interesting, we talked about trust, hope. To me, the whole financial system is in fact spiritually rooted. Is he crazy? What's he saying? Yes, spiritually rooted, because it's based on confidence, trust, and faith. I'll give you an example. We take a farmer, and he's a hard-working man. He has a farm. And he has a son he's very proud of. And he says, son, one day this farm will be yours. And if you work very, very hard and you save money, you'll be able to buy more equipment, maybe expand the size of the farm, buy part of the adjacent property. He says, Dad, you've been working very hard. You've sent me to school. I have an MBA now. We can do that now. We can do it now. Yes. I just have to write a business plan Yes, on paper. I go to a bank, I talk to the loan officer, I talk to the banker, he'll lend me money, and we can do what we want now. Paper? Lend you money against a on paper plan? Yes. That is what banking first started to do, and now credit is shrinking because there's a loss of faith, but that's a bet on the future. The banker, yes, he'll hedge his bet, he'll look at prevailing interest rates, decide what interest he'll charge, but based on a plan, he's looking into the future. He's looking at what he wants of the future, what he believes the future can bring, and that's a transaction, and that works. Now, if you want to borrow a little money, you go to a bank, you borrow it for yourself. If you're a corporation, you want to borrow more money, you also go to a bank, but banks get together, they create a syndicate of banks, they diversify the risk. That's the whole area of corporate finance. But it's brilliant. How else do you raise money? Well, there's equity financing, shares. Now, shares are rather interesting. There's price and value. Oscar Wilde, and he was talking about the Americans, said, the Americans know the price of everything and the value of nothing. Pretty unfair, but price and value is pretty interesting. What's the price of this desk? Well, demand, supply, the marketplace. And the value? The value added, the crafts in the table. It's complicated. And if you have shares, to illustrate this, the stockbroker will come to you and say, I have a very good share price for you. It's a great company. This share is selling at only 6 times earnings. The market and the sector is selling at 12 times earnings. This share is actually 50% cheaper than the market. But what does that mean? Well, 6 times earnings is already a look at 6 years hence. We're looking into the future. We're looking at the value of a share for the next 6 years. The earnings ratio may change, but we're looking 6 years. And basically the guy is saying, but you know, it's cheap because the whole marketplace and everybody has confidence to look 12 years hence. So this is really cheap. So the entire system is based on a forward-looking system. And that system works. Money. In 1944, there was Bretton Woods, which came and said, well, there's not enough gold around to support the system. Let's look to the largest, most solid economy, the US, and we'll peg everything to the dollar. And then in 1968, currencies, Western currencies, went off the gold system completely, and now we have paper money. Paper money which is floated, which is based on what? It's based on the goodwill of the issuer, governments. Do you have faith in governments? Do you trust governments? Do you have confidence? In which case, that money will circulate. Now, it's gotten so bad that we have some pockets in the world who've decided, don't believe in this money anymore. Shaky. They've created pockets of relationships in smaller economies that work with barter trade. I'm an electrician, you're a doctor. I'll wire your house against or in exchange for medical advice. Fine, it makes you feel secure because you have a smaller community, you think you know what you're dealing with, but basically we're regressing. We're throwing out a baby with the bathwater. We're throwing out a good system because of lack of confidence for a system which is purely regressive. Now, politicians and economists know that it's based on confidence. They know that. Super Mario Draghi, the other day of the European Central Bank, talked about the euro. I was looking at CNBC, I picked this up. I'm glad newspapers didn't pick it up. He said, the euro is like a bumblebee. It will have to learn to become a normal bee. And I thought, that is amazing, but I hope newspapers don't bring it up. Because what I thought he was referring to is physicists will tell you, the bumblebee can't fly. The body's too big, too heavy, the wings are too small, it can't fly. But the bumblebee flies. Why? Because it hasn't studied physics, it flies. Now, the whole system is based on confidence and trust, and it's not the system which is at fault, it's the fact that economic systems are relationships. It's people working together. Why isn't it working? we've lost our sense of trust and confidence in relationships and people. So what do we need? Values. I've noticed a lot of CCC people do believe in values. We talked about values today. So I'm thinking, all right, values, they're rather abstract. What if I were to choose a value system? What would I look for? Well, let me look for something which is ancient, which goes back before Buddha. So we're talking about Buddha, I think it was 543 BC, 600 BC. And I've been a part-time student of many different things. I'm probably an eclectic, hopefully not a dilettante, trying to become more grounded. But I have been a student for some years of the Bon tradition, the Bonpo, Dzogchen, Tibetan tradition of yoga and philosophy, which is pre-Buddhist. And they talk about the nature of man is 4 immeasurables. And in fact, that's been picked up by Buddhist traditions. They talk about the immeasurable attitudes. So that has survived. What are they? Joy, love, compassion, and equanimity. They're beautiful. So I gave this some thought some years ago and thought, they're very beautiful, but how do I touch those? How do I access those? Do I express them? Am I that way naturally? When I have a question like that and I want to see how practical it is, I sometimes think of my son, who at the time was an adolescent, he's now 22, pretty pragmatic and grounded. And I think to myself, what if I were to have a conversation with him and test him on these? So I think to myself and think, if I go, son, peace, love, joy, you must feel compassion for your friends and fellow men. He'd say, Dad, you could revert back to your hippie days again, or have you really lost it? I mean, my dad thinks he's St. Francis of Assisi, you know. So I think to myself, all right, let me go back to the man who was talking about this. He's a little wonderful Tibetan Lama called Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche. We call him Rinpoche, which is distinguished scholar. And I came to him and I asked him, I said, these 4 immeasurable values, beautiful. Ah, yes, right. I said, how do I access them and in what order are they? He looked at me as if he probably thought at the time it's a consultant. He wants me to rank them now. So he looked at me and he said, they're you. They are your nature. Joy, love, compassion, equanimity, peace of mind. And it really is translated as equanimity. I think it's translated from equanimity in the Chinese and the Tibetan language. They must have a word for that. And I said, my nature, but yes. And he left me with that. And so he left me with a question. And it's a bit what Denis Bourgeois was talking about yesterday. There I was, left with a question. So I've been a yogi for many years, and I teach yoga, and I do meditate. I meditate daily. So what I did is, as with Zazen, and Zazen means seated meditation, I sat with that. Now, what happened? It's my personal experience. I sat with it musing about these values. And when you meditate, meditation is all about simply letting go and clearing the mind. You open up a space. The thoughts settle down. The transmutation thoughts, as Patanjali said, begin to settle down. And in this space, you come to a place of equanimity. You come to peace of mind. All the mental anguish and functions and projections are not actively working anymore. So there, it struck me when I came out of meditation, yes. Attitude, immeasurable quality number 1, equanimity. Wonderful. And when you come out of meditation, and if you've created that space, you go outside, you look around you. I don't know if any of you have read Eckhart Tolle, who talks about the power of now in nature. You look around you and you appreciate things. The beginner's mind, what they talk about in Zen. You suddenly appreciate because you see, because your mind is clear. You simply appreciate what's happening, life, nature, the miracle of life. And there, yogis talk about upwardly rising prana. There is a sort of direction to it. Joy begins to emerge. Wow. Wow. Yeah. Smile begins to. And I'm thinking to myself, ranking order number 2, joy. And then when you do begin to cultivate, it's very delicate, like a flower, this joy, you can experience love. Love and wonder, it comes out of awe. And if you begin to experience joy and love, then when you meet a cohort 4, 3, 2, 1, there's real empathy. There is compassion. And so, what I'd like to leave with you today, and this is just one value system, is that if we could access and begin to live these values, and this value system to me is one of the most ancient and perhaps one of the better ones, and then if everyone were to live that way, we would live with synchronicity as to what the future wants. And Raphael isn't here, but I was going to try and explain that my take on this is that if you're trying to create a future and you're stressed and you're blocked and you're angry and you're greedy, it doesn't work and you have all this friction. The economy doesn't work. The systems break down, not because of the system, because of you. But if you're open, if you're listening, if you become more aware, then intuitively you begin to understand what your mission is, what your destiny is, as they say in the East. And if you live, and Jaworski talks about this, and Peter Senge talks about this, and Otto Scharmer, if you allow this intuition to arise, and you live in accordance to what your mission and destiny should be, the future will work itself out, and you will be living in accordance with what the future wants, and so will everybody else. Thank you very much.